Hey Rose, how
All
are
right.
you?
I'm good, thanks, Nick. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I
That's
think,
good.
yeah, I think we can sort of skip the hi, how are you, and who am I bit, can we? Because we know
We
each other.
certainly can.
And just before we start, one of the things I need to do, because as part of my accreditation, is just get the first six or so people who I do this with. Um,
Yeah.
they just fill in a quick evaluation. It's all multiple choice. It'll be quite easy. Would you be willing to do that? It's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so I'll
No,
send over that. I'll send it over as a link. It's just with Gallup, so it's very, very simple to fill in. It'll be very
yeah, no problem.
easy. So, what you read through you did your strengths. Did you read through any of
Yeah.
the reports, or did you just look at the top five?
No, look, I read through my five reports,
Uh huh.
all my five things related to myself.
Yeah.
So I had a read of those, what they meant to me. Really, more so the first three I looked in more detail,
Uh huh.
and then the fourth and the fifth one I kind of just really sort of skimmed through. But yeah, no, it's interesting and very much on the money.
Yeah. So, what were your first thoughts when you read them?
Look, the first one obviously being strategic, I mean, it really summarised me to a T.
Yeah.
So I've always known I'm more strategic in my thinking,
Yeah.
and I suppose the biggest component for me, I mean, the first couple of paragraphs just really give me an overview as to what being strategic meant. What really what was really good for me was in the section to the left hand side near the bottom, which is if strategic is if it is a dominant theme for you.
Yeah.
It kind of gives you a few tips.
Uh huh.
And there's some stuff there that really sort of rang true, especially about scheduling some daily quiet time.
Yes.
And and that's something I don't do, and something I know I should do because I react and make decisions very, very quickly.
Uh
And and as a result, sometimes
huh.
quite often I've found myself thinking, you know what, I wish I hadn't said that.
Yep.
Because once I've given it another 10 minutes thought, I've come up with a better idea.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so it's managing my own level of patience, and that would obviously make a massive difference.
Yeah, oh look, I hear you there. I'll let you in on a little secret. So strategic is my top one too. So I hear you.
Awesome. That's good to know. We can coach each other on
Yeah,
that.
definitely, definitely. Look, just to give you a bit of background, so this is a tool that's been designed by Gallup. Now you know who Gallup are?
I'm not well, not until I did this.
Yeah. Okay. So they're one of the biggest research companies in the world.
Okay.
The reason I highlight that is that the research that's gone behind the creation of this tool is really robust. It's about 40 years in the making. Many surveys have gone into um, the creation of the tool. Originally, it started, they were looking at what made people successful, what made businesses successful, what made people successful in work. And as they were doing all the surveys, they ended up coming up with common themes. What they also had, Don Clifton, I think it's Don Clifton, he was working in the, Jim Clifton, he was working in the positive psychology field. So this whole idea of wellness rather than looking at what's wrong with you. So when they combined
Yep.
the two lots of theories together, they realised that it's so much better if we focus on what we do well, because then we're in flow. Because when we're focusing on what we don't do well and we're trying to bring up our weaknesses, it's almost like struggling against the tide. So rather than looking at something that you don't do well, why don't you look at something that you do well and then work out how you can apply those talents in other areas so that you can achieve what it is you want to achieve. So that's the basic theory behind it. And if you can
Okay.
see, yep, so if you can see what's on the screen at the moment, what they talk about is this idea of naming, claiming, and aiming your strength. So the idea is, first of all, you start to language exactly what it is you're good at. Because before
Yep.
doing this test, if someone said to you, what are you good at? What would you have said?
Look, I would have said creating strategies
Yep,
and implementation and leadership, um, and yeah, being accountable.
yep. Yeah, so that's really good because often people can really struggle to language that. If I had said to you, what are you not good at? Would you find that easier or harder to language?
No, I personally would find it pretty easy. I know my flaws.
which is kind of all right. Although, as I said, the whole idea of the strength finder and working on your strengths is so that you're actually focusing in on what you do well.
Yeah.
So the other way it works, the top 5 strengths, they describe it almost like being the retina of your eye. So this is
Okay.
almost like a filter that each and every, almost each and every thought, each and every emotion, how you view the world is generally filtered through these top 5 strengths. And then, of course, there are others, which are almost like wearing glasses or wearing sunglasses or wearing novelty glasses as you go further down. But for
Yeah.
now, we're just concentrating on the top 5. The amazing thing is that the likelihood of someone having the same strengths as you in the same order is 1 in 33.3 million.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So unlike Myers-Briggs and DISC profiling and some of the other profiling tools, this is really individualizing. And once you start to claim your strengths, like really feel confident in, hey, wow, this is what I can do, it builds confidence. And you then
Yep.
start to realize what it is that you can do and what you're just not good at. And the things that you're not good at, rather than thinking, oh, wow, I can't do that, I've got to become better, what you do is actually partner with people who are good in those strengths. So,
Yes.
you know, the whole idea, the more secure you are with yourself, the less you feel like you have to put somebody else down, or the less you have to feel unhappy within yourself because you're not able to do something. So it is easier
Yep.
to ask for help. Does that make
I
sense?
like it. It
Yep.
does indeed.
Yep. Yep. So that's the basic philosophies behind this. Um, although actually we might quickly do that. So there's about 7 questions there, and we might go through them quickly again, given we've got time constraints. So how would your friends describe you?
They would describe me as being fun,
Yep.
friendly,
Yep.
enthusiastic.
Yep.
I'd say strategic.
Yeah. Well, that's good. We've got that. So what I want you to do is hold in your mind, and I've written it down so I can always remind you. So they're going to describe you as fun, friendly, and enthusiastic. Just want you to hold that
Yep.
in your mind for a little while until as we go through, dive a little bit deeper into your strengths. If you want to make something
Yep.
happen, what would you do?
I would do it.
Brilliant. And if you had to influence someone, what would you do?
I would have a conversation with them.
Yeah. How would that conversation, what would the direction of that conversation be?
The conversation would depending on what I want to influence them on. So if it was, if there's an idea I wanted them to take on for themselves, I'd understand for within myself what the idea was that I wanted them to take on. Generally, a roadmap appears for me
Yeah.
when I'm thinking about what I want to create, and then I'd have a conversation. And I wouldn't really lead the conversation or set it up in a way that's structured in terms of like attempting to sell them. It'd be more so having a conversation to understand what they're up to, and
Uh-huh.
identify if there is a need for what I'm talking about, and then I'd infuse them with my passion for that, exactly what I want to influence them on,
Uh-huh.
and get them to see my way of thinking.
Uh-huh. Very good. As I said, now remember that one.
Hmm.
And so if I was to ask how you build and nurture relationships, what would you say?
The building relationships for me is easy. The nurturing part is probably the part I struggle with. I mean, for me to build a relationship is essentially just once again, having a conversation, having a straight conversation.
Yeah.
I don't, there's not much airs and graces these days with the way I communicate. I mean, I do, and I'm polite and I'm courteous and I'm straight, but I know what I'm talking about. So I found more recently, or over the last few months, having a straight conversation about who we are, what we do, or who I am and what I do, and then offer some value to the person I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
In terms of nurturing relationships, it's just being in communication and being accountable, and ensuring that once again, if there's anything to talk about, I talk about it, and I come from a place of honesty, and where I can, inside of the situation, be as generous as I possibly can.
Yeah. Okay. And just so that so you know what I'm doing, I'm just getting, in a sense, what we're doing is we're warming up your mind, and I'm getting you to tell me a
Yep.
few stories and getting you to think about how you manage particular situations, so that when we actually go into a deeper look at each of the themes, you'll remember these conversations and you'll be thinking about how the your dominant themes are actually
Yeah.
influencing the sorts of choices that you make. So
Yeah. I hear you.
how,
Yeah.
how do you analyze a situation?
How do I analyze the situation? As a rule, I think it literally is something that happens pretty quickly in my mind.
Yep,
I'll get something presented to me. I write it down. I always have to write it down,
yep,
and um, and then in writing it down, I just start to see patterns,
yep,
and I'll really create the pattern. So I'll either create a flow diagram, or I'll just literally just not even close my eyes, just stare at something like a blank bit wall,
yep,
and the ideas will start to emerge. As a rule, though, I do need to write it down, so I'll use a whiteboard or use a pad, and
yep.
I'll just start creating stuff.
Oh, it's brilliant. You can really hear your strategy play there. Your strategic sounds like it's really strong. You must have
Yeah,
loved when you read strategic.
yeah. What's quite interesting is when you go on my LinkedIn profile,
Yeah,
the majority of the things people have actually, marked against me is strategy.
strategy.
So,
Yep, yep. So it's obviously right on the money there. Uh, what
yeah.
activities are you drawn to? So even just outside of work, what sort of activities are you drawn to?
Look, I run and exercise every day. So I run 3 times a week. I go to the gym 3 times a week. So I love physical exercise.
Yep,
I personally am more of a, I need to really be physical in terms of the exercise that I do. So I
yep,
prefer high tempo exercise as opposed to walking, so
uh-huh,
something a bit more chilled out. I love TV and movies. So you go to the cinema, just watch television.
uh-huh,
I enjoy hanging out with Coco. So really anything that involves being around Coco and whatever she wants to do and watching her play and do sport or do whatever she wants to do. I enjoy. I don't like sitting down with her, or I'm not really drawn to reading or to sitting down and being docile unless I'm watching television. So I
yeah,
need some level of stimulation for my mind or something physical.
yep.
Um, it has to be really one of those two things, either challenging me mentally or challenging me physically. Um, yeah, I think they're probably the cool ones there. And I like
Yep.
going to the beach, but once again, I need to be stimulated at the beach.
Yep. So can you think of a moment like a peak experience, a moment where you felt absolutely and utterly in flow, that just everything was, those moments where everything almost seems to slow down and you can almost look at it and think, oh, wow, this is just the best.
Um, Look, I think that's. Hmm, I think running's probably the most likely. I mean, probably the perfect time that's ever happened, or the most recent time, or not even recent, but the last time I can
Yeah.
really remember flying out. Look, first and foremost, just the way I work day to day. I mean, I often find only a couple of days ago, I negotiated a sequence of deals in one day,
Yeah.
and they were all interlinked, different clients completely, but I had to have it all work to have the perfect, or the optimum solution,
Yeah.
and it all worked. Like I had a series of conversations with different CEOs and essentially nailed every single deal. So
Wow, it's
it
brilliant.
worked, but once again, it was based upon a strategy, and I had worked out a strategy in my mind as to how I needed things to play out, and then I just executed it. But also from a physical point of view and running, like last year when I ran the 10K event for the Gold Coast marathon series, that 10K run was absolutely perfection. The whole thing just played out exactly as I wanted it to play out from start to finish. It was brilliant. It was
When
actually better than I expected.
when you say it played out, can you be a bit more specific?
Yeah, sure. So I created a strategy as to how I was going to run.
Yep.
So I knew that to do the time I wanted to achieve, I had to play to the way I felt in my training.
Uh-huh.
So essentially, I wanted to ensure that I got to the run early because normally I get there either on time or just slightly late, so I missed the start. So I got there early,
Yep.
which had time to walk to the starting line, to stretch, to do a proper warm up, which I never really had before. I
Yep.
positioned myself with athletes that are probably slightly below my level.
Uh-huh.
So when I went off at the start, I wouldn't be tempted to go too quickly.
Uh-huh.
I'd be more attempted to find my pace, which is what I personally need to do in my first couple of kilometres just to warm up.
Yep.
And then at the same token, it then harnessed my competitive nature, because I was with slower runners, I would naturally would be overtaking them even although I was going pretty slowly. So I then started going faster and faster as a result, which allowed me to warm up, get the competitive juices flowing,
Yep.
and then in the mid-part of the race, I was warm, I was on point, I had my pace,
Yep.
and then I just went for it, and as a result, I didn't really labour throughout any of the race. In fact, I went faster than I've ever run before,
Yep.
and even at the end of the race, I still have so much left in the tank, which I just executed the end really, really well as well, and it's a great race.
Yeah. I just wrote down some of the phrasing that you use then, and I don't know whether you felt it. And certainly it's interesting because it's different doing it over the computer to when you do one of these things face to face. But it sounded to me like, even reliving that experience, that you felt in flow, that you felt really good. Would that be right?
Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. And so you also mentioned then about being competitive, because that was one of the other things that came up in your theme too. What did you feel when you read out your one about competition?
Look, absolutely spot on. I mean, I'm probably less competitive than I ever have been, more so from being a parent, and being the owner, CEO of my company. I'm sort of more likely to see successes around other people than myself. At the same time, I am competitive, and I've all the way through my life, that's been one of my that's been my biggest driver. So it's allowed me to, or given me it's been one of those things that's had me progress quickly in career and obviously through my life, because I measure myself against anyone around me, and whoever's the best around me is who I measure myself against, and if they're better than me, then I just need to, I understand very quickly what makes them better than me, and then I put and play the same strategy and improve it. And that strategy coming in once again.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm also hearing so many of the words that just come straight out of the competition playbook, so to speak, from the Gallup point of view.
Okay.
That idea of measuring yourself. If just as a quick exercise, if you think into the future a little bit, and you were at traffic lights, or what happens when you're sitting at traffic lights and the lights go green?
Look, to be honest, I drive a sports car, and I don't accelerate quickly at off lights because I do drive a sports car.
Okay.
So I find, because I have a fast car, I don't need to go fast.
Yeah.
And for me, I'd rather, I'm pretty casual about driving.
Yeah.
I say that if I'm late, then or if I'm in the wrong lane and need to get over, then I'll just put my foot down. But when it comes to traffic lights and comes to like things like those, like cars, like I don't really. Yeah, I'm not one of those that has to come off the lights first.
And if you're walking along a street and you notice someone walking a bit faster than you?
No, not anymore. Maybe in the past, not now. No, once again, I don't. And this is the thing, because I'm now physically fit, and I am actually I'm pretty quick at running, and I'm in good shape. I don't feel the need to take some out. And, at the same token, I have a pace, right? And I suppose what's happened to me more recently is I've got to understand myself, and I've got to understand my pace and how I like to operate, and therefore I maintain my pace. And if there's someone slower than me in front of me, or there's a set of circumstances which means I can't operate at the pace I want to, and I need to, then I'll maneuver myself past whoever's there. At the same token, I'm not. My level of competition hasn't gone to that level, or isn't that level anymore.
It's interesting. We had because sometimes with competition, it's just that overwhelming drive to be first whenever. Because one of the main ideas with competition is this idea of comparison. And so, do you find yourself continually comparing?
Not as much so. So I think, once again, that the whole competition aspect to my personality is something that's subsided over time. It's still obviously there, and it's at a different level now. However, I think what's changed for me is this. I mean, now I own my company.
There's
There's nothing really to compare myself against. because I want my staff to be better than me, and I know if every single person in my organisation is better than I am, then fantastic. And that brings me, and the same thing applies with being a parent. It's changed my viewpoint.
Yeah.
At the same time, when it comes to being competitive, if I'm competing against another company for the same bit of business,
Yeah.
or we've got the same bit of business, we're competing against each other to get a better result, then absolutely, I mean, that's obviously there for me, and I want us to make sure we are the number one. And in that scenario, I will identify, or we will look at what the other companies are doing to make themselves better, and then improve it.
That's brilliant. So one of the other parts, and as I said, just even hearing you say that, you've obviously you've got your level of competition as a result of the reflection and the self-development work you've already done. As you've said, it's at a mature level. Because the other thing with strengths often is that we have what we call raw talent, and when it's a raw talent, it's something that's inside of you and tends to be inwardly focused. However, as you start to understand and name and claim the strength, particularly when you start to claim it, then it tends to be outwardly focused and you actually use it for a greater good. And it certainly sounds to me that with your competition, you've already claimed it. You understand that aspect of yourself, and as you said, you claim it. You aim it actually with your team, and you use it to help the whole team as opposed to just being yourself.
Yeah,
would that be right?
That sounds good. Yep, that's spot on.
Yeah. So again, given time, I mean, I've got a lot of information here, but what we might do, I've done up this table just based on some of the information, and I thought we can almost just go through, if we just go through this and sort of talk on some of the points, and then you might feel like you want to add certain aspects. And it can be interesting too as you look across the table to see how the 5 themes relate together. So what you might want to do is imagine a star, a 5-pointed star. And so the idea with your 5 main talents or your 5 main themes is that rather than, often we're told that we need to become well-rounded. Well, with this paradigm shift, it's not about being well-rounded. It's about actually having a 5-pointed star where you recognize these are your peaks. So each of these 5 themes represent your peak performance. And so you don't need to file down the peak performance. What you just need to do is to enhance it and to use it for greater good, to shine. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yep. So if we look at strategic, and that obviously that one being your first one, and it says, so would that be true that you are happy when you're looking at possible options?
Absolutely.
Yep. And as you said, you like to find the best path.
Yep.
And you love finding a way through a challenge that people think are impossible. Does that resonate with you? That when someone says, oh, it can't be done, that you'll think, bloody hell, yeah, I'll find a way.
Absolutely.
Have you got, can you think of an example where you may have done that?
Every single minute of every single day.
As I said, with this one, I really hear you on this one. So, and one of the things that's strategic is often that you'll hate doing something as it's been done before. Would that be true?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what you'll probably find is that you need flexibility and an opportunity to change yourself midway through a course. So you want to have the flexibility that if something changes, you want to be able to change, or if you see a better way, you want to be able to change. Would that be right?
Yep, that's fair.
Yep. And this is then, if we look at this whole idea of balcony and basement. So when you're on the balcony, so times of complete flow with something like strategic, you apply imagination and creative persistence to finding the best path. And I think we've probably talked about that. Would that ring through for you?
That does, yes.
And times in the basement, and this is an interesting one, I think, with strategic. I know even when I was going through, that sometimes in a quest to find a better way, you may be so quick to criticise a process that's already been done before that you don't explain to others how or why you want to change it. Would that be true?
That is true, yes.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're reminded with strategic is because so much is happening in our heads, sometimes we need to just take a step back and actually explain the thought processes, because people can think, hang on, how come you leapt to such a quick decision? How come you know it all? Why are you criticizing me? And because they don't understand that, hang on, I've already seen it in my head. I already know how it's going to work. This is going to work. Just trust me. But sometimes people
Yeah, no,
don't.
exactly. That's so true, and that's the part that I did pick up from the actual profile. It's, I need to give everyone a chance to catch up and explain my thought process.
Yeah. And
And most of the time I haven't got a thought process. It's just I have the answer.
yeah, do you find that you can explain the thought process, or would that be difficult, or would it be, if you just apply yourself to it, you could probably explain it?
No, look, I can explain it. I mean, what I generally have to then do is go backwards and then understand how I got to the solution in the first place, and then I
Uh-huh.
understand the solution because I do see the solution. It just happens very quickly.
Yeah.
It's almost like walking through a maze at lightning speed,
Yeah.
and then I'll suddenly find myself at the end of the maze, and I'm like, okay, and then I have to then backtrack and look at the steps I took to get to where I got to, and then that allows me to then explain it.
As I said, yeah, it's interesting. You were saying earlier on when we were going through some of those questions, how you literally just see that path in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, what I do a lot now these days, I use Excel a lot,
Uh-huh.
and I apply analytics and numeracy to a lot of things. So, especially a lot of the work I do is based on numbers, and my strategy is based upon us getting certain returns of investment and whatnot. So, from that perspective, it's easier to work out the formula because it's all formula-based and algorithms and
Yeah.
equations to get the end result. And
Yeah.
that, in a sense, has created a logical pathway.
Uh-huh.
So I think by working with numbers a lot, it also then allows me, it's created a bit more of a solid neural link in terms of how to get to a certain, the journey or what path I took to get there.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it's easier than it probably ever has been in terms of explaining myself.
Yeah.
At the same token,
Yeah.
I'm impatient, therefore I don't like to waste my time explaining how we got there. I'd rather just say, this is a solution, let's get on with it.
As I said, I'm hearing you there. What about that other point there? Sometimes when faced with multiple options, you can find it difficult to make a decision. Does that ever happen to you?
Look, I'd probably say at that point that's when I have to then sit back and just really just be with it.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I think it's probably honest, to be honest. What it says, what's present for me in seeing that statement is when I will then utilise team, and I'll
Yep.
say, look, we have a couple of different options. What do you think? And I'll get other opinions and get everyone else to contribute at that point as well.
Yeah. 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 Look, and that's one of the things too, is strategic. It is really important that we schedule quiet time, so that we can consider our thoughts and strategies. And sometimes we need to think through the situation before we give the answer. Remember how you were saying a bit earlier, how sometimes you just say what it is you think we should do, and then maybe if you'd thought about it a bit more, you'd come up with a better solution?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's as I said, it's interesting that those initial conversations that we were having. I don't know whether you're seeing it now, but even as we go through how true it is of our main theme, it's just something that drives us. The interesting thing about strategic is that it is something we are born with. Of all of the themes, they say this is one that it's not strategic in terms of how someone learns how to strategize, although it is just this innate quality where you can see the patterns. It just is.
Yep.
And as I said, you'll quickly spot them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I like it.
yeah. So really the power and edge, the magical part, because all of the themes, I mean, this is the other thing which I probably should have mentioned at the start, all of the themes are equal. Sometimes when people see different themes, they think, oh, I wish I had this one or I wish I had this one. But really all themes are equal because they all have their unique power and edge. And particularly as you combine them, you'll find there'll be aspects of your strategy that's different to my strategy because of the other themes that we've got connected to them. And that's where the uniqueness of each individual comes in.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you bring a creative anticipation and a persistence to any team, to any group project, because you'll find the path. So that's really where the power and edge of this theme is. And I feel like I'm racing through this. I hope I'm not going too quick.
No,
Is it all right?
fine.
It's all right. So then if we move on to Achiever. Now, Achiever is one of your executing strengths. And again, some of the language that you were using about just getting it done, That often works here with achiever. Achievers are hard workers. They set the pace for production. They love completing a task. Do you have a to-do list that you tick off?
Yep, every day.
Every day? And if you don't happen to tick off one of the items on your to-do list, how do you feel?
Look, I'm okay with it because as a rule, if I haven't ticked it, it's because I chose not to. So I powerfully choose not to do stuff. I do go home and sleep at night.
Yep.
So I don't kind of take my incomplete to-do list home with me. But I will reschedule it or at least do something on the task. So I have to have done something towards it.
Yeah.
Even if it's setting up the next day's tasks.
Yeah. 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 So do you take a moment to pause and celebrate when you have achieved something?
Kinda.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those little things that your little achiever inside would probably be quite happy if you actually took some time sometimes to celebrate your accomplishments, because it can be really easy.
Look, I do go for a little stroll around and high five and basically share it with TJ or someone in the office.
Yeah, that's good.
So I do like to get some acknowledgement. I'll generally acknowledge myself.
Yep.
I'm very self-acknowledging.
Yes. That could be even some of the competition coming in, or a bit of your relator, which is quite interesting. Cool. But the thing with achievers is that they can be very driven to achieve, and sometimes if they're not taking time to actually celebrate what they've done, they can quickly move on to the next task. So, but you probably do you find you need to have tasks to stretch you all the time?
Look, it varies. I mean, I don't need to have tasks. At the same token, I get bored if I haven't got anything to challenge me. So even earlier on today, I was kind of thinking I've just once again I've closed a couple of different. I get things done pretty quickly, so I found myself with a little void, and it was only like maybe for about 10 minutes. I was like, hang on a second, I'm not got anything to do.
Yeah.
And then I suddenly realised I've got a whole bunch of finance stuff I could do, so then I got stuck into it again.
Yeah.
So I do need things to do.
Yeah. So again, that's the achiever coming into play, because one of the things you probably hate is a lack of diligence. If you had one of your employees or even of yourself, if you don't feel like you've done your best, how do you feel?
Yeah, I can't stand it.
Yeah, because if you're going to do something, you do it right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so what you probably find is that you need freedom to work at your own pace. Do you like?
Yes, definitely.
Yep. So then when you're in complete flow with your achiever, you'll find you work hard, you have a great deal of stamina, and you take great satisfaction from being busy and productive.
Yes, very true.
Yeah. So so far, even if you're just looking at those first two, your strategic and your achiever, when you're able to see the path, get things done, move through forward, you'll be experiencing that sense of flow. Can you see how with these two, or even just these two so far, that experience that you were talking about with your race come into play?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's so what it is, it's then a matter of thinking, okay, how can I use knowing this about me? How can I then use that in my next project or when I'm working with someone, so that I can achieve those same results that I had at something like you did in the race?
Yeah.
In the basement though, with Achiever, you might sometimes find that it's difficult to say no, and you overcommit and then burn the candle at both ends because you need to meet a deadline. Have you experienced that?
That's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think sometimes with the ideas of having an awareness of our basement issues is that we can think, okay, I can see that I'm in the basement. I need to then come back up to the balcony, remember that I've got the stamina, and just be mindful of what I am committing to. So the whole idea of strengths is that you don't focus on weaknesses, but you do look at how your strength lands in the world, how your strength is working beyond your own internal self.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. So again, moving quickly along because we've got 20 minutes to your competition. So the
Yes.
idea with competition that you are alert to all and any competitors. Would that be true?
Very true. Yep.
Yeah. And you strive to win?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens if you come in second?
Look, I'm okay with it,
Yep.
but I'm only okay with it if I actually gave it my best shot.
Uh-huh. Yep.
If I execute the strategy as I played full out,
Uh-huh.
then I'm okay.
Yeah. Okay. As I said, it really sounds to me like you've managed. I mean, the same with your strategic and your achiever. It sounds like you really are that you're well aware of yourself and that you're
Yeah.
managing that these are quite mature talents within yourself. So
Yeah.
one of the other parts here is that you love an opportunity to go up against the best.
Yes, definitely.
Yep. So, and again, I think that was coming through in some of those stories that you were telling um, earlier about even with the race, positioning yourself in a certain spot. But then when you're talking about even some of your competitors from a work environment, it sounds like you like the opportunity to pitch against the best of them. If you do,
Yes.
yeah. Uh, and so then with the I need to compare myself against the performance of peers. Would that be true? I think in a
Look,
work environment.
not so much anymore.
Uh-huh.
Um, and to be honest, once again, in this kind of environment, no.
Yep.
If I was an employee, then absolutely.
Yeah. That makes sense. I've got I'm hoping we've got time. I've got some insights for managers. It's a really, really cool, in addition to this, because when you do
Okay.
work with teams, what you do is you go and you work with the managers to start with, and you unpack them and you get them to understand their themes, and then you get them to understand how their talents, how their strengths relate in the way they manage a team, and then you help them work out a
Yes.
way as they understand the strengths of each of the individual members in their team, how the team can actually work together as a collaborative whole, where each person is uh, leaning into or acknowledging each other's strengths. So I had a look at it for both competition and strategic because I thought some of it you might find interesting. So I'll have to keep going quickly so we get to it. Um,
Okay.
so in the balcony, and this is I think where you're at now, that you aspire to be the best and you inspire those around you to achieve the highest levels of performance. And that's when competition is working at its best. It sounds to me that that's where you're at.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Yeah. Because in the
Yeah.
basement, um, a person might feel a need to compete even if there's no one else there. They might be self-centered and put others down or have a dummy spit after a loss. So
Yeah. So that's yeah. I don't really find that
yeah, yeah,
not anymore.
yeah. So as I said, from everything that you've been saying, you're at this level. The thing that I find interesting is that one of the things they say through Gallup with people with strategic is that the language that they'll use are things like nailed it. You know how you said you nailed it. I think you said
Yes.
faster than I'd run before. So very much in your dialogue, there's that level of competition, that comparison. I don't know whether you notice it.
Yes. No, I do. I'm present to it.
Which is good because it inspires those around you. And I think, especially with these themes like competition, when you use it for the greater good, because it helps others pull themselves up, it's just brilliant. You have so much to offer. So I
Yeah,
can
like it.
see why your business is booming. And then moving on to futuristic. So people with futuristic are fascinated with tomorrow. Would that be true? Do you like to imagine what's going to happen in the future?
I am. I'm very excited about the future. Yeah,
Yeah. And you tend to anticipate or imagine what could or should be.
I do.
And you love that inspiration that comes from dreaming.
I do.
Yeah. And this is an interesting one for me because Dan's got it. And when I was doing my course, there was a few people who had it, and it seems to present itself in different ways. So how do you see the future? And I don't mean as in, how do you perceive it? How does it
In
present in
what
your mind?
respect? So how does it appear to me?
Yeah.
Look, I guess it's different. It's for me. It's a combination. So I'm very spiritual in my way of thinking,
Uh-huh.
and so I kind of look at things from a from a more sort of what the universe is going to bring is exciting in terms
Uh-huh.
of, and knowing what I'm doing right now and the games we're playing, I'm excited about the opportunities that could be presented. I
Yeah.
don't I don't visualize exactly how the future looks.
Mm-hmm.
At the same token, I'm clear as to how I would feel
Uh-huh.
in the future, and that's what I'm present to. So it's more present to the feeling as opposed to the way to actually visualizing like a mansion and the rest of it. I do have those obviously those types of things in the back of my mind, and I am goal orientated, and
Uh-huh.
I do create goals. At the same token, when I create a goal, I create my strategic brain kicks in and works out the pathway.
Yeah.
So I don't get too caught up. I mean, I'm futuristic to a sense of I'm excited by the future.
Uh-huh.
However, I don't get too caught up in in how the future looks, without and get caught up in daydreaming. I am by nature a daydreamer. At the same token, it's
Yeah.
something that's not present for me anymore.
Yeah. Again, I think it sounds to me very much that futuristic, because it can be one of those whole balcony basement things, and it's sounding to me like you're well and truly in the balcony in terms of your futuristic, that you can
Yeah,
pursue with
completely.
all the growth that you've done. That, and it's interesting that you say feeling, because often people with futuristic will describe they can just see it, they just know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Would you say that you just know what's going to happen because you feel it?
Look, I trust my sense of self, and it comes back to my strategic. It's like I know within myself that I'm on the right way path, and I allow my higher self to, and my instincts tell me. So I
Hmm.
trust my intuition, I trust my instincts, and that's where my feeling comes from.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, I feel it within my heart that I'm on the right journey, and if I'm not, and ultimately I listen to that. So yeah, it's interesting, but I trust my feelings in terms of what's visual.
Yeah. Would you describe yourself as a kinesthetic person? You know, that whole idea of visual, kinesthetic, and
Yeah,
yep.
I'm definitely visual kinesthetic,
Uh-huh.
so I need to see things, but then there's a strong kinesthetic component, which is why when I'm creating any strategy, I see it in my mind at the same point. I know it's there, and
Yeah.
then I have to put it on paper, and then it's the action of putting it on paper, which is my kinesthetic,
Yeah.
that obviously goes hand in hand. So I'm certainly visual first, hence I speak so quickly, and then my kinesthetic is very strong within myself as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I'm terrible auditory.
I hear you there too.
Yeah, I use a lot of auditory words.
Yeah.
So anyone who's very NLP orientated would just from my use of language would assume that I was auditory.
Yeah, it's funny though. I think I hear the kinesthetic more.
Mm.
I know maybe that's just because I'm more attuned to it, being quite kinesthetic myself, that I'm picking it up. But um,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, oops, I better keep moving. So often you need opportunities to talk about or foresee the future. Would that be true?
Yes.
Yep. So on the balcony, I think this is what we're talking about. You're inspired by the potential of what could be, and you can energize others with visions of the future.
Yes.
Yeah. And then I think we don't need to worry too much about the basement. That's the idea of the attention wandering or daydreaming about what may be, but some of the ideas might not be practical.
Yeah. Not so much anymore.
That's, yeah. Yeah. And then the fifth one is relator. Now, relator is an interesting one. Relator is one that suggests that your friendships run deep. Would that be true? That
It
you
is.
have
Yes.
that you are happy with fewer friends, but you want to have good friends that you trust and you are loyal and you would do anything for your friends?
Yes.
Yeah. It's so as it says, that friendships need to be genuine and authentic. That you like to get
Yeah.
to know more about the people who are closest to you, and you really love those close, caring, and mutual relationships where there's mutual respect, mutual integrity, and you know that you can really trust and rely on a person.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So no sort of, if you're in a group situation where you haven't met people, how would you normally how would you What would you
Everyone loves me.
do?
The fact is, I don't find it hard to win friends and influence people, so I can become everyone's friend very quickly. And
Uh-huh.
it's more so because I'm not a puddle, right? So I ask them the question
Yeah.
that's important to in a way that's sympathetic towards where they're at, and I'm conscious that different people have different levels of openness and trust, and don't like Danny can sometimes be obviously a bull in a china shop in the way he
Yeah.
asks the question, right? And
Yeah.
it's and I'm different to Danny in the sense that I'm happy to ask the question. At the same token, I'm mindful of the person, where they're at, and
Yeah.
how they're going to respond. So I'll probe in a way, but I'll always ensure that I get to know people quickly. It's by getting to know the person I determine whether or not there's somebody that I actually want to spend more time with.
Yeah.
And so, in the instance, I'll chat to anyone, and everyone will think I'm just a really good guy, and I am. And I'm genuinely like people, so I'm interested in people. At the same token, that's getting to know them, and
Yeah.
inside of my first conversation with them, I'll really work out whether or not that's the person I actually want to go back to and then
Yeah.
hang out with for the rest of the night.
Yeah.
And I won't waste my time with someone. I'll chat to them once and I'll move on.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because if you don't find that initial connection, I guess, if you don't feel that need to go deeper, that, as you said, you'll just move on to the next conversation to find someone that you can feel that deeper connection with.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, although it says here that often relators can hate the social discomfort of meeting someone new, it sounds, I mean, you're able to use, draw in on your other strengths, and you can pinpoint, yep, I'll talk to you, and then I'll decide if we've got a connection. If we've got a connection, I'll pursue the friendship, and if not, I'll just move on.
Absolutely, and I think once again that's come with over time and age and experience.
Yeah.
Like I'm open,
Yeah.
I'm generous enough. I'm open and I'm generous in terms of what I share about myself.
Uh-huh.
So I'm not guarded in terms of the way I am about who I am as a person. And I don't, and I'm also very conscious of when I'm speaking to people, their level of openness back to me. And if I'm open to somebody else, someone and they're very closed and guarded, then the conversation is not going to last for too long.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you need that mutually caring, or that um, mutual sense of honesty, would it be?
Yeah, and connection.
Yeah.
It's all about connection at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is honesty, it's connection, it's openness, and it's having a certain level of trust. And I'm once again I've had a fairly mixed background in terms of the different types of circles I've hung out with and different types of people that I know. So I don't judge people based upon their socioeconomic or demographic background. It's more so based on who they are as an individual and as a person.
Uh-huh.
And back to.
Yeah. So would this be true, this I need time and opportunities for one-to-one interactions?
Look, I wouldn't necessarily say one-on-one interactions. I'm very comfortable in a group of people that I got on well with.
Yeah.
But I do like to have a chat to a person.
Yeah.
At the same token, I like to be stimulated. So as a rule, I find there's very few people that can actually hold my attention or have me just be really, like I can make myself happy. Same token, my preferred way of being is to surround myself by a group of my group of people that I really like.
Yeah.
And I like to hang out with and talk to.
Yeah.
And at the same token, I have certain people in my life that I'm very comfortable just hanging out with just them.
Yeah.
And they're very much the same sort of type of person as I am, and therefore the conversation stimulating, and yeah, it's good fun. So look, I'd say yes and no, but more so, look, I like to have one-on-one interaction. It's definitely wasn't for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, the thing with related to is that often it's really important to stay in contact with your friends, because your friends are your fuel. If you're feeling down, do you find that spending time among your close friends is what can really, obviously TJ and Coco too, that's what will energize you or bring you back up?
Absolutely. Look, for me personally, I'm at my look. I'm not a depressed person, so I don't feel I can make myself quite content and happy just through my own psychology and how I manage myself. at the same token, I'm present to my level of happiness it's a higher point when I'm with somebody else, when I'm socializing.
Yeah.
And it's either with TJ or with Coco or with friends. I'm not a loner, although I do need my alone time. My alone time comes from my exercise, from running and from getting to the gym, and that's my time, and I'm happy with that. At the same token, I don't need a huge amount of that, and I'm actually my happiest when I am actually interacting.
Yeah, yeah. And can you see how your relator might work well at work when you're relating with your team?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, because generally people with relator, they can be really good in a business environment because they'll be creating those bonds between members of the team, or they'll have those close bonds. They do need to be careful though. We do go just quickly into the basement. Sometimes they about being selective and playing favourites, so it can be
Very
difficult
much so.
to form a friendship because cliques form.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
Yeah. So when relators working in the balcony, it's about enjoying deep relationships with others and finding satisfaction in working with friends to achieve a goal. Would that be?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's it can be, as I said, it can be a really great one in a work environment, particularly when you've got a team of relators, because everybody relates really well, and it can be a very collaborative team environment.
Yeah.
So as I said, I know that we've got about 5 minutes, but I thought if you are interested, just I'll read some of this stuff to you about how particularly things like strategic and competition can work practically in a management role. Would you be interested?
Yeah, sure. That'd be good.
So what it says, managers with dominant strategic talents can push teams forward. They rarely use reverse because they've got a natural ability to cull and sort out and choose the most effective route. Would that be true?
That is true.
Yep. So strategic thinkers can help the team stay focused on the most important performance goals and outcomes. Their thoughtful approach to situations and challenges removes the obstacles before they appear, and so they inspire their team to move forward. These managers provide a calm assurance to their team. However, because there's always the other part, strategic managers need to be aware of their biases, and they need to make sure they're weighing the possibilities objectively and leaning towards, so that they're, rather than just leaning towards personal desires or comfort levels. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Yep, that does completely.
Yeah. And I think this is the other one that we talked about before. At times it might be important for managers to slow down and explain their strategy to team members so that everyone can appreciate their decisions.
Yes, agreed.
And as it said, sometimes people can misinterpret a manager's strong strategic talent as a criticism.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just that matter of allowing people to quickly see those, allowing the others to see your patterns so that everyone benefits.
Yep.
Now, the interesting thing about competition, because you're actually the first person that I've met that has competition in their top 5.
Okay.
So it's not, with the different coaches and other people that have been through, people haven't had competition. So I had a bit of fun learning about competition before I came to this talk, and we've got 4 minutes. So with managers with competition tend to create daily, monthly or yearly metrics for success that help the team track performance.
Yes, definitely.
Yep. And their competitive spirit can stimulate innovation and spur the team to operate at high levels to outperform competition.
Yes.
Yep. So managers can position their players so that each team member is using their strengths and give their employees the best chance of success.
Yes.
Yeah. So as I said, it sounded to me like your competition, because you've got it in that mature state, you're really using it well. You're landing it well. You're applying it well so that you can achieve success in business.
Very much so.
Yeah. And then I think these barrier ones, I don't even think, as it says, sometimes managers can get stuck competing against their team members, and so they need to be aware of it. And they might focus on black and white and winning rather than winning at all costs. But as we said, it seems like you're well and truly on top of that.
Yep, no, that's fine.
Yeah. So what did you think? What did you get most out of that? As that was done at lightning speed, because I know we've got about 3 minutes.
I think it's excellent. I mean, what's really good about this particular profile is it's once again it's spot on, but it also got me to further understand, like I really have got in the past. And what's interesting about this is it's only really been the last sort of 5-6 weeks we've really, myself and TJ and Derek, my business partner, have got together and really analysed our strengths
Yeah.
and focusing on it and looking at what our strengths are and how we complement each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got our entire team to look at their strengths and understand, and then we've allocated the team accordingly based upon their strengths.
Yep.
And restructured the role. So it's quite interesting this to happen when it has, because it really says to me that the decisions we've made have been obviously spot on. But secondly, there's also stuff to continue to learn on, and I really have got how strategic I am and how quick I think and the nature of which I operate on. And as you said before, it fills you with a level of confidence when you understand who you are, and you get why you are who you are.
Yeah.
And it's knowing it's reassuring. And I think for myself at times, I mean, like I have, as I've got older in my career, I've felt levels of anxiety that
Mm-hmm.
I've never felt in my youth.
Yeah.
And even if it is like speaking in groups, in front of groups of people and doing stuff like that. I mean, I used to do that in terms of, speak to 50, 60 people at a time and be absolutely fine with it. But I think as I've got older and older, I've become more self-conscious, and I think that self-consciousness has come from once again losing sight of who I am and losing sight of what I'm talking about, as opposed to looking at making myself wrong or being too or analyzing myself too closely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think what really just knowing who I am and trusting in who I am and understanding my strengths and playing to my strengths, that in a sense is all the confidence one needs to just progress. And I think it's good because it's really got me once again thinking more so about it's almost like I get the whole process is about building a strong foundation for yourself, and which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you, pardon me, as you said, when you start to look at how it goes with TJ and your other business, your business partner, when you really start to understand each other's strengths, I mean, I know with Dan and I, for example, we've really been able to pinpoint what it is that where we rub up against each other, and often it has been when we've not necessarily been respecting each other's strengths. And so when you start to understand, hey, this is who I am, and I'm not doing things on purpose to annoy you. It just gives a whole other language and a whole other ability to work side by side with somebody.
Yes. They completely.
Yeah. So, as I said, there is so much stuff here that you can do with teams, like if and partnerships. So, has TJ done this? Is she interested in doing the?
I think I'm not too sure if she has or not. She knew about it because I told her I was going to have this chat.
Yeah.
And she said she obviously she's more in touch with what you guys are doing than I am.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure if she's gone through the process.
Yeah. Yeah, be interesting to see how, because that can be a really interesting thing too, to look at it's one of the things that Dan and I did. We sat down with our reports and we read through them, and it was a really good way for us to start to understand each other because it's coming from a completely objective part. It's not, it's not like me trying to explain, hang on, I can see the path. I'm not trying to be critical. I have already seen that this is the best way to go. And yes, I understand I need to explain that out a bit better. But this is why it's happening. And so, yes, I take on board that I need to explain it a bit better. So it can just, as I said, help a lot of ways there.
No, I think it's good. I like it.
Yeah. So there's a few reflective questions that we don't really have time to go through. As I said, but you can have a quick read of those. One of those things too, a lot of the time with this, it's like it plants little seeds. And then the more you start to think about how these play out, the bigger the garden grows. So, there might be potential to do things, in the future. So.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And to be honest, the thing that's probably come most present for me just reading through those things that I'd lost sight on is, with the competition aspect.
Yeah.
The competition part of me, I've not buried, but it hasn't really been present for me. Based upon the fact that I'm not in a competitive environment in terms of I don't feel the need to compete against my team or my staff.
Yeah.
But what I have let go of inside of this, which is something that I see an opportunity, is to reinvigorate competition within my team. And
Yeah.
then, in fact, it was earlier on today. I went to the guys and said, right now, now you've got a brand new team. Let's get some competition going.
Yeah.
And start to push them, start to give them something to strive for the end of the week. And so they start playing because it'll raise the game. And it's the first time I've said anything like that in the past, like probably the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And then and that's, I suppose, from doing the survey or doing the questionnaire the other day to obviously get to understand my profile. Those questions were obviously were tapping on my competition doors, which then reinvigorated some or sparked some level of sparked those neurons again. So
Yeah, because it's who you are. And this is where you will get a lot of flow. You can have a lot of success by channeling your inner competition in that highly resourceful way. You just up your ante, you up your game even more.
That's it, and to be honest, competition has been dormant for me. So I think it's one of those ones that has always been so prevalent in my life and really, really assisted me. And more recently, I've almost boxed my competition away because I didn't really believe I needed it. And I think it's something that's going to actually make a massive difference to where we're at right now in terms of the business. So I can see how I can really pull something out from there and actually implement it to get to another level. So that's really quite good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess the thing with this is just to the other thing to remember with with this information, what they talk about. Have you seen the movie X-Men?
Yes.
Yep. So the idea is that each of the mutants, they go to the X-Men to the X-Mansion, and because they've got all these talents, and they actually learn how to use them and to learn to use them resourcefully and responsibly. And so one of the other things too is once you start to understand your strengths, it's important to use them for the greater good and not to use them as excuses, as in, oh wow, I'm just competitive, so I know you're not going to do this. But you know what I mean? I'm an achiever. I've got to do this. This is why I'm doing it. So it's just something to be mindful of. But given all your spiritual, you've already done so much of this training, I think you probably understand what it is I'm talking about.
No, I do.
I just like to be mindful, because sometimes, the person who doesn't really know themselves that well, all of a sudden they can be given permission to be themselves, and they take it they forget that, permission to be yourself, but be careful of how it lands on others.
And to be honest, that's the way I be with TJ. The unfortunate thing is the person you're closest to is the person that cops it the most.
Exactly.
And TJ would obviously see the raw level of all this sort of stuff.
Yeah. So that's
being a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I hear you. But the thing is, as I said, once you're aware of it, you can think, okay, so I know I can pull myself doing it, forgive yourself, and then go back up into the balcony.
Yeah, true story. I like it.
Yeah. Okay, so I might hand you back over to Dan quickly. He probably wants to have a quick chat, but I do know you need to go. So that was wonderful, Roche. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. That's excellent. That's awesome.
Cool.
Awesome, mate. That was really interesting.
It certainly was.